Weston saw her from 100 yards out, a splash of turquoise fabric against endless red earth, stumbling through scrub brush under the Arizona sun. 6 years old, maybe 7, lost, alone. Navajo. He was a white rancher on the wrong side of understanding, the wrong side of history. She was from a world that had learned not to trust men who looked like him. But when she collapsed, when her cracked lips formed words in a language he couldn't speak, none of that mattered. What he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that saving her life would mean confronting everything he believed about the world, about himself, and about the beautiful widow who would change him forever. The August sun hammered down on the Arizona desert like a blacksmith's anvil, turning the red earth into waves of shimmering heat. Weston Cole wiped the sweat from his weathered face and squinted across his ranch, watching his cattle cluster beneath the sparse shade of mesquite trees. 43 years old, divorced for 5, and content with the silence that stretched for miles in every direction. That was his life, and he'd made peace with it. The fence line near the eastern boundary needed checking. That's what brought him out here on horseback at noon, when sensible men stayed indoors. As his mare picked her way through the rocky terrain, something caught his eye, a splash of turquoise fabric against the rust-colored landscape, moving slowly near the base of a sandstone outcropping. Weston urged his horse forward, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle in his saddle holster. Mountain lions weren't uncommon out here, but as he drew closer, his breath caught. It wasn't an animal. It was a child, a little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, stumbling through the scrub brush in a traditional Navajo dress, her long black hair tangled with bits of sage. "Hey!" he called out, dismounting quickly. "Hey, little one, you okay?" The girl's head snapped up, her dark eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. Her lips were cracked, her cheeks flushed with what looked like early heat stroke. She said something in a language he didn't understand, Navajo, he assumed, and took a step backward, nearly falling. Weston raised his hands, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "Easy now. I'm not gonna hurt you. You look like you need water." He pulled his canteen from his saddle and held it out, taking a knee to appear less threatening. The girl stared at the canteen, then at him, her small body trembling. Finally, thirst won over fear. She stumbled forward and grabbed the container with both hands, drinking so desperately that water spilled down her chin. Slow down, Weston said gently. "You'll make yourself sick." She didn't understand his words, but something in his tone must have registered. She lowered the canteen and met his eyes, searching his face for something. Whatever she found there seemed to satisfy her, because when he gestured toward his horse, she allowed him to lift her into the saddle. As they rode back toward his ranch house, Weston's mind raced. The nearest Navajo community was at least 15 miles east, across the informal boundary that separated his land from the reservation. How had a child so young wandered this far, and where were her parents? Weston's ranch house was a modest, single-story structure built from local stone and weathered wood, practical rather than beautiful. He carried the girl inside and set her on the worn leather couch in his living room, where the swamp cooler provided blessed relief from the heat. "Let's get you cleaned up," he said, more to himself than to her. He brought a damp cloth and gently wiped the dust from her face and arms. She watched him with those enormous dark eyes, still wary but no longer terrified. In his kitchen, Weston scrambled eggs and made toast. Simple food, but it was what he had. The girl ate ravenously, confirming his suspicion that she'd been lost for more than a few hours. As she ate, he studied her dress, recognizing the intricate patterns he'd seen at the trading post in town. Traditional Navajo weaving, probably made by her mother or grandmother. After the meal, exhaustion overtook her. Within minutes, she was curled up on his couch, fast asleep. Weston covered her with a blanket and stood there for a long moment, feeling completely out of his depth. He'd been around cattle and horses his whole life, but children, that was foreign territory. He needed to contact someone. The tribal police, probably. But his landline was out. Summer storms had knocked down lines 2 days ago, and the phone company hadn't made it out yet. His cell phone barely got reception out here on the best of days. The nearest help was Ava Begay, a Navajo woman who ran the trading post in town about 20 miles west. She'd know what to do, who to contact. But that meant leaving the child alone or taking her on the drive. He decided to wait until morning. She needed rest more than anything right now. As darkness fell, Weston found himself sitting in his armchair, watching the sleeping child. She made small sounds in her sleep, words in Navajo that he couldn't interpret. His ex-wife Sarah had always wanted children, but he'd been too focused on keeping the ranch afloat during the drought years. Now here he was, a temporary guardian to a lost child from a world he barely understood. That night, he slept on the floor beside the couch, just in case she woke, frightened in a strange place. Dawn broke clear and cool, the way Arizona mornings do before the sun reasserts its dominance. The girl woke slowly, disoriented at first, then seemed to remember where she was. Weston made breakfast, more eggs, some bacon, orange juice, and watched as she ate with better manners than the night before. "We need to find your mama," he said, pointing to her, and then making a cradling gesture. "Your family, you understand? Family?" The girl's expression shifted, and she spoke rapidly in Navajo, pointing emphatically toward the east. Tears welled in her eyes. Okay, Weston soothed. "We'll find them, I promise." The drive to town took 40 minutes on the dusty ranch roads. The girl sat in the passenger seat of his pickup, pressed against the door, watching the landscape slide past. When they reached Begay's trading post, the old building looked like a relic from another era, which it essentially was: weathered wood, a covered porch, and windows displaying a mixture of tourist items and practical goods. Ava Begay was behind the counter when they entered, a stocky woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a traditional bun. She looked up from her ledger, and her eyes went wide. "Weston Cole, is that—" She stopped, then launched into rapid Navajo directed at the girl. The child burst into tears and ran to Ava, who came around the counter to embrace her. The two spoke back and forth, the girl's words tumbling out between sobs. "Her name is Tala," Ava said finally, her expression grave. "She's been missing for 2 days. Her mother, Kaya, has been searching everywhere. The tribal police were just here this morning asking if I'd seen anything." 2 days? Weston felt his stomach drop. "In this heat, she's lucky to be alive." "Very lucky, and lucky she found you." Ava's gaze was assessing, measuring him in a way that made him uncomfortable. "Kaya lives about 20 miles east, just inside the reservation boundary. She's a widow, raising Tala alone, works as a weaver. Can you take me there? I want to return her myself, make sure she gets home safe." Ava studied him for a long moment. "You know you're walking into a difficult situation. Kaya's husband died 3 years ago. She doesn't trust easily, especially not white ranchers. Some of your neighbors haven't been kind about grazing boundaries." Weston felt his jaw tighten. He knew exactly which neighbors she meant. Men who treated the invisible line between private land and reservation as an opportunity for encroachment rather than respect. "I'm not them." "We'll see," Ava said. "Follow my truck. And Weston, let me do the talking at first." The drive into the reservation took them deeper into the stark beauty of the high desert. Red rock formations rose like ancient sentinels, and the sky seemed impossibly vast. Ava's truck kicked up dust on the unpaved roads, and Weston followed, Tala now dozing in his passenger seat despite the rough ride. Kaya's home was a traditional hogan, an octagonal structure of wooden logs and earth, with a modern addition attached, probably for practical living space. Sheep grazed in a nearby pen, and a loom stood under a ramada shade structure. an unfinished rug stretched across it in geometric patterns of red, black, and white. Before they'd even parked, a woman emerged from the house. Weston's breath caught despite himself. Kaya was perhaps in her early 30s, with long black hair that fell past her shoulders and an expression that shifted from hope to joy to tears in the space of seconds. She wore jeans and a simple cotton shirt, practical clothes for ranch work, but moved with a grace that seemed to make the ordinary beautiful. Tala woke as the truck stopped and saw her mother. "Shima!" she cried out. "Mother!" and scrambled from the truck before Weston could even open his door. Mother and daughter collided in an embrace that spoke of grief transformed to overwhelming relief. Kaya dropped to her knees, holding her child, speaking soft, rapid Navajo while tears streamed down her face. She checked Tala over with her hands, feeling for injuries, looking for signs of harm. Weston and Ava stood back, giving them space. After several minutes, Kaya lifted her head and looked directly at Weston. Her eyes were red from crying, but sharp with intelligence and wariness. Ava spoke in Navajo, explaining the situation. Weston caught his name, and a few English words mixed in: ranch, water, safe. Kaya listened, her gaze never leaving his face, as if trying to read his soul through his sun-weathered features. Finally, she stood, keeping Tala close against her side, and approached. When she spoke, her English was clear but accented with the rhythms of her first language. "You found my daughter?" "Yes, ma'am, on my land, about 15 miles west of here. She was in bad shape, dehydrated, exhausted. I took her to my ranch, gave her food and water, let her rest. You could have brought her to the police in town immediately." It wasn't quite an accusation, but it wasn't a compliment either. Weston met her eyes steadily. "It was evening by the time I found her. She was terrified and exhausted. I thought she needed rest and safety more than another few hours of strangers passing her around. Maybe I was wrong, but it seemed like the right choice at the time." Kaya studied him for a long moment. "You kept her safe, you brought her home." She paused, then added with visible effort, "Thank you." The words seemed to cost her something, acknowledging gratitude to a man who represented the culture that had taken so much from her people. Weston understood that, without anyone having to explain it. "I'm just glad she's okay," he said simply. Ava cleared her throat. "Kaya, would you like me to stay? Help with anything?" Kaya shook her head. "No, Ava. Thank you, but we're fine now." As Ava walked back to her truck, Kaya looked at Weston again. "How did she seem? Was she frightened?" "At first, yes, but she trusted me once she saw I meant to help. She's a brave little girl, smart too." For the first time, a ghost of a smile touched Kaya's lips. "Yes, too brave sometimes. She wandered after a lamb that escaped the pen, got turned around in the canyons." The smile faded. "I should have been watching more carefully." "Don't," Weston said, surprising himself with his firmness. "Don't do that. Kids wander, it happens. What matters is she's safe now." Kaya's expression shifted, surprised maybe that this stranger would offer her absolution for a guilt she'd been carrying for 2 days. Tala tugged on her mother's shirt and spoke in Navajo, pointing at Weston. Kaya listened, then translated. "She says you gave her your blanket, that you slept on the floor so she could have the couch." Weston felt his face grow warm. It seemed right. "She also says your eggs are not as good as mine." Now there was definite amusement in Kaya's voice. Despite everything, Weston laughed. "Well, she's probably right about that." The tension between them eased slightly, like a rope given slack. Kaya glanced back at her home, then at the loom under the ramada. Would you like some water before you drive back? It's a long way, and the day is getting hot." It was a simple offer, but Weston understood it was more than that. It was an opening, a tentative bridge across the cultural divide that separated them. "Yes, Mom," he said. "I'd appreciate that." The inside of Kaya's home was a careful blend of traditional and modern. Navajo rugs on the walls, a propane stove in the kitchen, family photographs beside ceremonial items. Weston sat at a simple wooden table while Kaya poured water from a ceramic pitcher, and Tala sat nearby, watching him with open curiosity now that fear had been replaced with familiarity. "Your home is beautiful," Weston said, and meant it. "My husband built the addition," Kaya said, her voice neutral but carrying weight. 3 years before he died. Accident at the mine in Kayenta. "I'm sorry." "Everyone is sorry." She sat down across from him, her hands wrapped around her own glass. "But sorry doesn't change what is." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of grief and loss hanging between them. His divorce, her widowhood, 2 different wounds that somehow echoed each other. "Your ranch," Kaya said finally, "it borders the eastern edge of your property line?" "Yes, ma'am. Some of your neighbors let their cattle graze onto reservation land. It causes problems." Weston nodded slowly. "I've heard that. I keep my herd on my own land. But I know there are others who don't respect the boundaries." Respect. Kaya tested the word. "That's rare between our peoples." "Maybe it shouldn't be." She looked at him sharply. Pretty words from a white rancher. Not trying to be pretty, just honest. Weston leaned forward slightly. "Look, I'm not going to pretend I understand what it's like to be Navajo or what your people have been through. I don't. But I do know that good fences make good neighbors, and respect goes both ways. Your daughter wandered onto my land, and I treated her the way I'd want someone to treat any lost child. That's not about culture. That's just being human." Kaya was quiet for a long moment, her dark eyes searching his face. "Tala says you were kind, that you sang to her when she cried in the night." Weston felt his face flush. He'd forgotten about that. Some old cowboy song his own father had sung to him as a child, offered instinctively when the little girl had woken frightened in the dark. "I don't remember much Navajo history from school," he admitted, "but I'd like to learn more about your culture, your people, if you'd be willing to teach me." "Why?" The question was direct, almost challenging, because ignorance breeds fear, and fear breeds hate. I've seen enough of that. He paused. "And because your daughter trusted me enough to let me help her, that means something." Kaya stood and walked to the window, looking out at the desert landscape that stretched endlessly in all directions. When she spoke, her voice was softer. "My grandmother says that the best bridges are built slowly, with many small stones, rather than one large beam. Each stone must be placed carefully, must be tested for strength. Your grandmother sounds wise." She turned back to him, and this time there was something different in her expression. Not quite trust, but the possibility of it. "Come back in 3 days, Saturday morning. I'm teaching Tala to weave. You can watch if you want. Learn about how we create beauty from simple threads." It was an invitation that carried weight far beyond its simple words. Weston stood, understanding that he was being offered something precious, a first small stone in a bridge between 2 worlds. "I'd like that," he said. "Thank you." As he walked back to his truck, Tala ran out and grabbed his hand, speaking rapidly in Navajo. Kaya called something from the doorway, and the little girl released him, but smiled up at him with complete trust. "She says you're a good man," Kaya translated, "that you have a kind heart." Weston felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been closed for a long time. Tell her she's a brave girl, and I'm honored I could help her." Kaya translated, and Tala beamed. As Weston drove away, he watched in his rearview mirror as mother and daughter stood together in the doorway, 2 silhouettes against the ancient landscape. He thought about Saturday, about learning to weave, about bridges built from small stones. The desert stretched out before him, vast and beautiful and full of possibilities he'd never imagined. For the first time in 5 years, Weston Cole felt like maybe his world was bigger than just cattle and fences and solitude. Maybe there was room for connection, for learning, for something that looked like hope. The sun climbed higher, but the heat didn't feel quite so oppressive anymore.